Good evening and welcome to the October 22nd, 2008 Civil Service Commission meeting. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Here.
Chair Abkarian?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Coleman is absent.
What's next?
Reading of the minutes.
What's your pleasure?
Move to approve the minutes as printed
And dispense with reading.
and dispense with reading.
Second.
And motion and second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian? Chair Abkarian?
Yes. What's next?
Oral communications.
No oral communication. Next.
Eligible list established.
There's no cards. Anyone oral communication? No. Next.
Eligible list established.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the item before you are the eligible lists established since our last meeting. As you can see from your report, there are two lists that have been established, both promotional, as is the custom. The total number of applications received are listed in one column, and the total number that made the eligible list is in the far right column. If there's any questions you have about either of these lists, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Questions? Next.
Job bulletin for approval, Library Assistant, Children's Services.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is the request for a job bulletin for approval for the position of Library Assistant, Children's Services. The reason this item is coming before you is for twofold. First of all, the department is seeking an open recruitment process, whereas in the past, or in the previous administration of this exam, it was done on a promotional basis. The second part of it is that the department is recommending that the minimum requirements for this position be amended for the purposes of this recruitment process to require a bachelor's degree. As you can see from the bulletin listed, ordinarily this position would require just a certificate as a library technician or a library assistant program. Purpose of that change is to really to grow a librarian from this process. We're finding it more and more difficult to recruit qualified librarians, and most of you, I think, know that to be a librarian, you have to have a master's degree in library science, and it's a lot of schooling, a lot of work, a lot of effort, and there's really a shortage of them, particularly in certain areas, children's services being one of them. The department would like to hire some qualified individuals who might be inclined to pursue a master's degree in library science, and I think what the hope would be to conduct this recruitment and find somebody who currently has a bachelor's degree, because you have to have a bachelor's degree in order to pursue the master's, and ultimately hire an individual or individuals who we could assist in possibly pursuing a career as a librarian. So that's basically the goal of this. If you have any questions about this process, we have Cindy Cleary here, who's the Director of Libraries. Carolyn Fleming is also here, a library administrator, and Rosie Akopian from my staff is here. I will note that this item was discussed with the GCA. They indicated that they concur with this action, and with that, I turn this over to you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
I looked at the job bulletin, and it merely requires a bachelor's degree. I mean, you could have a bachelor's, an engineer could apply for this if they have an interest in library sciences?
I believe so. And
A lot of engineering books.
Yes.
maybe we can ask the staff from the library here, but I don't believe there's any prerequisite bachelor's degree.
Cindy Cleary, Director of Libraries. We're looking for people with a breadth of experience, but the ideal candidate in this particular case would be somebody that has some experience working with children. But there probably are engineers out there who have experience working with children.
Or there are engineers out there that are children.
Yeah.
That could work too. Oh, sorry, Mr. Devine. I didn't mean to disparage engineers.
Seen a lot of attorneys that are women.
That's true, too. So you don't really care where the bachelor's is? Is that?
Well, I mean, going into librarianship as a generalist, we look for a variety of fields and people with a breadth of experience, as I said. In this particular case, we will probably focus in on the people that have more experience in education and things that are related to serving children. But yes, we will accept applications from any profession.
And why for this position do we need a bachelor's that we didn't need it, I guess, in the specs where it requires us just a certificate as a library technician or library assistant?
I think, as Matt said, I think we want to make sure that we have someone who has, I keep saying this, but breadth of experience, for lack of a better way of saying it. We want someone who has a little more maturity under their belt. We have a lot of our library assistants currently have bachelor's degrees, and we found that amount of experience really benefits in this profession. And as Matt says, it is a stepping stone to being a librarian. And we want to grow our own, so to speak, and a requirement to get a bachelor's degree is to have a bachelor's degree, so that kind of segues into the profession.
Mr. Chair, we've had some discussion about making that a permanent change to the specification, but we haven't quite decided where we want to go with that yet, but that could be an outcome for this particular classification, but we weren't quite ready to make that recommendation at this point. So,
Move to approve.
Hold on. Is there any other questions? Okay. Move to approve. Second. Roll call, please. Thank you.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Chair Carrion?
Yes. What's next?
Report on advertising budget expenditures, July 2008 to September 2008.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is your quarterly report on advertising expenditures. This report, very briefly, has the funds that have been expended and some of the activities that have occurred the first quarter of the 08-09 fiscal year. And as you can see, very early on in this fiscal year, we've only spent around $2,000 of the $61,000 that's budgeted for advertising. That's somewhat of a reflection of a little bit of a slowdown in hiring, but also the first part of each fiscal year, we spend a lot of time doing more promotional recruitments, and later on in the fiscal year, we have more open ones. The promotional recruitments obviously aren't going to require advertising and advertising costs since we're recruiting from within. But anyway, as is custom with this report, the expenditures are listed, and really, again, there haven't been a whole lot of advertising dollars expended in the first 3 months. Some of the other activities that are occurring are bulleted in the report, including the completion of the Glendale Police Department video, which I believe all of you have received a copy to, and that's been premiered on several local cable channels. His staff was also involved and active in several events, the Cruise Night event, the Unity Fest, with our booth, trying to stir up interest in employment with the city of Glendale. We're also working on a TV promotional brochure dealing with careers in the fire service as well, working with a producer right now. And again, we're expending our advertising money little by little in various different things, both media-oriented, video, print advertising, and we'll have more information on that as the year progresses. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. And you again want to recognize Rosie Akopian from my staff who prepares this report, and she's also available to answer any questions as well.
I have a quick question. Oh, anyone have a question? I have a quick question. Does the police department have their application or recruiting online? That somebody wants to become a police officer, they can go online and do we pay for those clicks? How do we get those? And is it directed to the City of Glendale employment?
Well, we advertise for police careers both on the city's website and the HR department's website specifically, as well as the police department has their own website as well. There's a link going both from our website to the police's website, and actually there's a link that addresses careers in law enforcement. That's obviously free as it runs on our own website.
Any other questions? Okay.
Move to approve.
Do we need to approve it?
No.
What's next?
Presentation of Glendale Police Department Reserve Officer Program.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, very proud to bring forth outstanding members of our Reserve Officer Program. At our last meeting, Commissioner Manukian requested that we provide a brief report on the Police Reserve Program and some of the activities they're engaged in, and I think it's a great opportunity to shed some light on, again, a really outstanding program which has served this community well for close to 40 years. We're talking about volunteer individuals who literally put their lives on the line for this community. They do have a presentation here, and I do want to introduce our old friend, Lieutenant Don Meredith, who will do the presentation and tell you a little about the program. So,
I've seen this guy before.
Commissioner Manukian, Commissioner Ganis, Commissioner Apterian, Commissioner Devine, Director Doyle. It's a pleasure to be here. In the back of the room, we have Sergeant Steve Carey, who's the sergeant in charge of the program. We have two reserves back there. We have Bill Torley and Javier Michael, as well as Kevin Dazan, the reserve coordinator, who is also a former reserve. And it's an honor for me to make this presentation because, you see, I, too, had been a reserve officer back a couple of years ago when I was young.
Were we alive at that time? Any of the three of us? I don't think
Yes.
so.
The reserve program is, in fact, 40 years old this year, which is very significant. And it's had its highs and lows as far as staffing, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and we're going to kind of cover that. But I've got a small PowerPoint here that I'm going to try and give you a quick overview. I provided some handouts here with a lot of detailed information. That's kind of important if you ever have any questions that somebody can refer them to, or refer to them to Sergeant Carey, Agent Dazan, or myself. As you know, back in 1968, the City Council at that time authorized the reserve program with part of the funding coming from a civil defense grant at that time. They authorized 35 officers to start what was called an auxiliary police unit to provide a resource of fully trained police officers from the community to help out in the event of civil disorder, disaster, or any of the Cold War era activities at that time. At that time, there was a budget of $29,954 for the program, for a coordinator, and for a secretary. And over the years, that's pretty much gotten down to Agent Dazan and Sergeant Carey trying to do everything they do, plus the reserve program. After the authorization for the program was approved, there were 4 officers that were sworn in. First of all, there was Guido Drogmiller, who became a Glendale police officer, ultimately full-time. Dennis Langerberger, Dr. John Langvin was a local chiropractor who served over 20-some-odd years as a reserve, as well as Paul Sanderson from the phone company. They were the first reserve officers for the City of Glendale, sworn back in 1968. The reserve officers, it's important to note, were trained and are still being trained at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Academy. Their training is comparable to that of a full-time police officer and mandated by state law under the California Office of Police Officer Standards and Training, or POST as we call it. To be a reserve officer, you have to be at least 20 years old, must be a citizen or have citizenship pending, have a high school diploma or a GED, good physical condition, pass a thorough medical examination, a psychological examination, and pass through a background investigation, the same exact requirements that a full-time police officer must pass. There is no difference in those requirements. There are 4 levels of reserve. There's what's called Level 1 or Level 1 24-hour. What the Level 1 police officer is for the reserve program is somebody who has received the comparable basic training of a full-time police officer, gone through the field training officer program, and can perform as an individual officer working a one-officer unit, same duties as a regular police officer. The difference between that and a 24-hour status is that if the city were to pass an ordinance authorizing 24-hour status, that reserve officer would in essence be a police officer 24 hours a day at no additional cost to the city. The level 2 police
I
officer...
didn't understand that. Could you explain that one more
Okay,
time?
level 1 police officer basically is qualified the same as a regular full-time police officer.
Right.
The level 124, okay, but their powers are only the time that they're working in the field.
Right.
A level 1 24-hour police officer has been grandfathered 24-hour authority to be a police officer if the city were to pass that ordinance. That's in the state law. That's the only difference is if the city chose to give them that 24-hour power of authority.
And what is our city?
Right now, we just have level 1 status. We're looking at making some changes to the program.
And if the city passed an ordinance, then you can have a 24-hour status.
At the direction of the police chief, he could authorize certain level 1, the 24-hour status. The level 2 is a step down from that. The training requirements are not quite as intense. It's designed for a police officer who must work under the immediate supervision of another officer who has completed a basic course. So they cannot work alone. They have to work under the direction, immediate direction of another police officer. And then there's level 3.
Sorry, quick question. On the level 2, do they still go through the...
Still go through an academy. Not the same amount of hours. It's a lesser amount of hours. That's why they have lesser duties. The level 3 goes to a little bit lesser hours than that, and again, they're limited in what duties they can perform. They have to perform duties that are not likely to result in any physical arrest, but they can do like jail transportation duties. They can be your tactical paramedic, your doctor. A number of the administrative responsibilities around the department can be encompassed under that heading. So in essence, there are those 3 different levels. One which is equivalent to a full-time police officer, the level 2 which can do the police officer duties under the direction of a regular police officer or a level 1 reserve, and then of course level 3 which is pretty much an administrative police officer, for lack of a better term.
And are these levels established by federal, or is it state?
These 3 levels are established by the state of California Commission on Police Officer Standard and Training, and it's a universal training standard throughout the state. And some agencies just have level 1, some have the level 1 and 2, and some have all 3 levels depending.
Do we have any other levels except 1?
We have the capability of having 3 different levels. Right now, we're pretty much functioning with level 1 and level 2. We're looking at expanding our program to include level 3s so that they can assist in many of the administrative, technical areas, photography, crime scene artists, a lot of things that we could use them for because they don't have the time to go through a full-time academy or the desire to be a level 1. Back in the 70s, the auxiliary officer program became known as the Reserve Officer Program. The title change was more to be reflective of the professional stature of our officers. At that time, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department started utilizing reserve officers in many, many different aspects of the department, and that resulted in the change of the title and upgrading of the training that they received. They began again at that time working police officers in patrol cars, handling calls for service, responding to emergencies, and conducting traffic enforcement. As we moved to the 1980s, they became, in our organization, we began to assign them to different details. Doc Langman, he used to work narcotics undercover. I know John Duell, one of our current reserves, has worked a helicopter. He's also worked in the gang enforcement detail. Officers have worked throughout the organization. That's what the 80s brought about. Again, opportunity and enhanced training. It also brought about a time when we started looking to recruit more and more police officers into the organization full-time, so we started kind of to raise our reserve pool for that, which kind of caused some of the numbers to drop. The late 1890s, the reserve program at that time also included the chaplain program. The chaplain program has since been moved into the volunteer part of the department because of some of the training standards that were required. As you can see in the picture here, at that time we did have a significant number of reserves, many of which have gone on to full-time careers in law enforcement. One of the positives about the program is that because it's a kind of a community-based program, we're recruiting from the community. Many of our businessmen come here, and they'll be a reserve for a while, and sometimes say, you know what, I want to move into the police department. And so as a result of that, we're bringing in a lot of the different cultures and ethnicities from the community into the department that way. Very, very good program for that. Unfortunately, the negative side is it reduces the number of reserve officers we have.
That point that you just brought up is, I'll make some comments later on, but that is one of the main reasons why I asked for this, because you guys have been successful in taking this and going to places that other programs that have not necessarily been. And that's why I personally at least want to learn more, and because you guys have really done a phenomenal job. You were able to recruit segments of the community that would have never, gone in that direction and or have learned. So, I really applaud you guys for making that effort, and you really have done a phenomenal job.
Well, I think a lot of that goes to the fact that we're recruiting from the community, from business people and leaders of the community who are doing this kind of part-time because they couldn't give a full-time commitment, and either they or their children decide this is a career that they want to choose, and here in the city of Glendale they've had exposure, and this is the department they want to work for.
Absolutely.
Again, now in the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Academy, we have instructors down there that are from the Glendale Police Department that actually serve as instructors on the Sheriff's Academy training staff. So it gives us a good opportunity to broaden the image of the police department's reserve program. One thing to note is our reserve police officers are treated as equals or peers by the full-time officers, possibly because many of them had formerly been reserves or because of the quality and professionalism of our reserves. They are extraordinary. In fact, I made a quick note here of a couple things that happened the last couple days. Armin Kazanjian, who was one of our reserves, I got 2 commendations on him in 24 hours. In one case, he was off duty, and he saw a runaway truck. Off duty, he ran, got in the runaway truck up on La Crescenta, and able to get in the truck as a delivery truck and stop it before it ran into any vehicles or injured anybody. Then I got another commendation on him because of the way he handled a problem in the community with some kids that were making a lot of noise and smoking and throwing their cigarette butts down the ground. Citizen commended him for his actions. Ron Villagracia, who's one of our dispatchers and also reserve, was getting off work the other night at 3 o'clock in the morning to go home early because he has something to go the next day he wanted to leave early for. Unfortunately, we had a murder, a home invasion robbery, and a commercial burglary all occur within less than a 5-minute spectrum, depleting our resources. I had to borrow 2 units from Burbank. Ron, even though he had planned to go home early on his own time, called and said, "You want me to don my uniform and come out and help?" And he was there to provide a wonderful service for us that, he'd give me an immediate deployment of another unit that I needed. So, this is the kind of quality of individuals we have. Currently, we're looking at restructuring our program. Like I say, we have the level 1 and 2. We're going to expand the level 3. I know the chief of police has got some of the ideas of what he wants to do with some of the technical reserves, as we call it, photographers, the medical people, to expand what they can do as a department and serve the community. As you see down there, I've got intelligence gathering, linguistics, interpretation. I talked about the crime scene artist or the portrait artist can be a benefit to the department, and other community outreach issues. In this case, this is Guido Drogmiller, who was a reserve officer. He was one of the first. He ultimately retired from the Glendale Police Department as a full-time police officer. Again, our reserve officers get to perform a variety of tasks. They get to work patrol, detectives, disaster response, the Metrolink disaster, the reserves were there. Brush fires, the reserves were there. They're just a very valuable part of the department. We had one training as a motor officer. He decided that was a little too scary, so now he works as a traffic car. He's also retired from the Los Angeles Police Department and decided to become a reserve for us. As you can see, what they provide the city, this is just for the last 6 years. And this is, you got to keep in mind, we're averaging right now between 8 and 10 reserves over the last 6 years. They have provided a number of hours, 42,000 hours of service, resulting in a savings of $2 million to the city of Glendale, or roughly $336,000 a year. In that same 6-year period, they initiated 484 arrests, 905 misdemeanor arrests, 1,359 traffic citations, 382 parking citations, and the most important part of police work, the documentation, they wrote 1,684 reports. This is significant because it was pointed out earlier, these are volunteers serving our community as police officers at great personal risk to themselves for $1 a year, which I don't even believe we get $1 a year anymore. And it's important to note that, in one case, I remember, in fact, Officer Torley was there when it happened. His partner wound up getting in a fatal shooting with a suspect when the suspect tried to shoot one of our police officers. So are they on the line and in peril? Absolutely. And this is volunteerism at its finest. The program over the 40 years has had highs of up to 50 officers and lows to 8 to 10 officers. Currently we're doing 8 to 10. Part of the problem is because our agency, as well as other agencies, are recruiting from the reserves because they have that same level of training that a full-time officer has, so we don't have to spend time putting them back through an academy. And most of the time, if it's our own reserves, we know the quality of the officer, and that's why we're hiring them. These are some of the reserve officers that have retired recently. Leroy Eastman retired after 33 years of voluntary service. Ron Robbins, who was a city employee, retired after 27 years. Doc Langman, 22 years. Robert DeBrock, 17 years, and Jeremy Gump, 10 years, and then he went into a full-time position in law enforcement. 33 years is a pretty significant commitment to the city of Glendale for $1 a year. Again, it's an excellent tool for bringing community members into the department It reflects the demographics and diversity of the community. What's most important is this is an opportunity for people in the community who understand law enforcement to go back to with their friends, their associates, and their own civic groups and kind of talk about what is the police department's about and present our image and explain how we do things or why we do certain things when there's a question.
On that very point, you brought up Armin Kazanjian. The reason why myself being involved with the city and for the past 10, 15 years started with a conversation from Armin. Armin approached me about 15 years ago, 10 years ago I think it was, when you guys were trying to do a fundraiser for the statue in front of the building. That's when he said, why don't you come and try to see if you can help? And he introduced me with Sergeant Mario Marchman, Captain Leif Nikolaisen, and that's how the relationship started,
Don't hold that against him, though. He's really a nice guy.
I mean, me and Armin go back since we were 10 years old. He was always interested in becoming a police officer. He knew he would not be able to because of other commitments, but, it's very interesting how things happen. If it wasn't for Armin, maybe I would not have been exposed to the. So these are some of the benefits that you guys really gain. That I think it's phenomenal.
Well, it's that kind of context most important because most of the recruiting we do for the reserve program, to be completely honest, is through word of mouth or the handouts I give out, like where I teach at a college or some of the other guys, because we do not have a recruitment budget. We don't even have a budget for the reserve program. So it's that word of mouth, but that's also how we're getting the quality individual because our reserves know the individuals that they would want to be working with.
Lieutenant, you mentioned the budget, and I had made a note of that. You said the first year we had like an $11,000 budget in '68. Are you saying we have no budget today?
The responsibilities and duties for the reserve program have been incorporated under the duties of Sergeant Steve Carey as well as Agent Kevin Dazan. The reserves get a uniform allowance at various points in time, but we do not have an actual funding string for the reserve program. We have to kind of rate other police funds for any funds that we need to do for the reserve program.
Isn't that bizarre? I mean,
I'm just briefing you.
No. I know. We're trying to help.
Excuse me, guys. Let him finish his presentation, then we make some more comments. Go ahead, Lieutenant.
What's interesting is and I had one of the reserves, John Doyle, do a survey of other law enforcement agencies to see what they're doing in recruiting and their programs and how they operate. And I find a substantial number of these programs do, in fact, pay their reserves on a regular basis. But most importantly, LAPD and LA sheriffs are trying to expand the duties and responsibilities of the reserves. Many agencies are actually tapping into the retirees when they retire from the police department. They still want to do some police work, so they stay and do 1 or 2 shifts a month. Councilman Dennis Zine from LA is a retired Los Angeles police officer, and he still goes out and does his reserve duties as part of that. So there are other programs out there. Ours is pretty much on par. Most have 10 to 14 reserves because usually if they get some really good reserves, somebody's hiring them full-time. This is just a quick overview of some of the people that have been in the reserve program that have moved into full-time positions. As you can see, Captain Ray Eady, Captain Kirk Palmer, 2 captains, moved in from the reserve program, 3 lieutenants, a lot of sergeants on there that have moved into the program, agents, and so you notice there are detectives, officers, CSOs, a variety of people, and these are went into full-time career opportunities here at the police department. And we still have this dedicated corps of reserve officers. Like I say, we have a couple there in the back of the room that they can stand just for recognition.
Why don't we bring them up?
Why don't you bring them up?
Yeah, come on, guys.
Could you?
You don't get paid for it. At least get the credit for it.
Get some TV exposure.
Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Bill Torley. I've been with the city for 32 years.
As a reserve officer with the city?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm Officer Michelle. Been here for 3 years, sir, as a reserve officer.
Thank you, guys.
That's become full-time for us, so we've done one more. And as you can see, this is a darkened alley.
Have a seat right there.
This is a darkened alley, and this is a poster you'll find on the internet, and we have it hanging around the station. It says, you wouldn't go in there for $1 million. A cop does it for a lot less. A reserve does it for free. Okay, now like I say, I really applaud the courage of these reserves because I go out there, I get paid for it. They're out there for $1 giving back to this community, and they deserve recognition for what they do.
Absolutely.
Kevin or Steve, did you have any words you want to share?
Do either of the reserve officers want to say anything? What do you? I'm sorry. Could you tell us what you do, like in your everyday?
I'm semi-retired. I used to work in the electrical construction business, and I have a small consulting company now.
And you, sir, before you I understand, becoming full-time, and congratulations.
Thanks, sir. I'm a furniture buyer for a retail company here in Los Angeles. Volunteer.
Glad to snatch you from them and bring you in. Could you name all the, if there's only 8, you probably know their names. Could you, if you do, if you don't know their names, if you can just mention their names, please.
John Dool, who's an attorney, Gary Dunger, who works for the state of California as a fire marshal, Armin Kazanjian, who's a local businessman, Ron Villagracia, who's one of our community service officers in communications at the department, Tim Anderson, who's a retired LAPD sergeant and currently works in the security business, and R.E. Simonian, who's in the jewelry business.
I want to make a couple of comments. First of all, one of the main, going back to one of the main reasons why I asked for this is, a lot of times we only hear when there's a problem or when there's a complaint. But, I think it's only fair for the average public to know about all the good programs and that you guys have and all the good things that you guys do. And as I said last time, when my work is done, I have an option to go home and be with my kids. But some of these reserve officers go home, put on a uniform, and for $1 go out there and protect the city. I mean, for me, that's really noble. But over and above that, again, going back to being able to recruit from different segments of the community, and also, my other interest was to find out more detail, and also inquired. We have our fire chief there. I don't know if the fire department, and this is something we'll talk over lunch. But I wanted to find out, if this is something that maybe the fire department or the different departments can try to take the good parts of the program and try to implement it. That was one of the main reasons why I had requested. And again, thank you for everything you guys do. I mean, it's now getting back to the budget. How does that work?
Well, basically, I guess Sergeant Carey and Agent Dazan have a multitude of responsibilities. This just kind of rolled into those responsibilities, and I'm simply just a manager. They're the workers on this. But anything we need for that, for equipment stuff, comes out of the regular general budget for the police department. That's what we have to raid. And, we're part of our restructuring. We're looking at some of the other options to how we're going to do things in the future. I mean, everybody's facing some fiscal realities here. But again, the reserves get the same equipment, the same training, that everybody else does. And the thing is that they're doing for that $1 a year, and that's...
I hope we're not going to make them pay for their equipment.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like I said, what's nice is our Glendale Police Officers Association recognizes the reserves and allows them to be associate members. They also recognize them at a retirement dinner. We have a retirement dinner coming up that Ron Robbins is going to be recognized. Even though he's a reserve, the Glendale Police Association recognizes that he is a part of the family of the police department and what he has done for the agency.
And also, there was some comments about the reserves, the numbers shrinking, but, you guys were able to recruit them into full-time, so you didn't necessarily lose them.
Well, we'd still like to have about 35 or 40 reserves out there, so if you know anybody, please refer them. But there's an extensive amount of training, it's, I forget how many months of training on weekends and nights. Kevin, do you want to address that?
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Kevin Dazan, the agent for the reserve coordinator. Initially, the training for a level 2 reserve is 22 weeks at the Sheriff's Academy, and to be a level 1 reserve, it's another 22 weeks. So it's very extensive training, and that is 2 evenings a week and 1 full Sunday a week.
Gee. For 44 weeks?
44 weeks.
Sorry, John, you won't pass the
I
background.
haven't got the time to do it.
You won't pass the 4 weeks.
For the drug exam.
I have any other comments?
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lieutenant, just if you can stick around. First of all, has this presentation ever been, Lieutenant Meredith, has this presentation ever been made to the City Council?
Commissioner Aperia, no, this actually was the first time a presentation has been made, and we worked on it the last several days to try and gather as much information, and actually it was good for us to go back and gather some of the historical documents that had just been put in a file.
I don't know, I don't set City Council's agenda, but I would assume that they would be very, very interested in this type of presentation. I don't think 90% of people really know what reserves officers do, what levels they have, and what they do. And so my recommendation would be if you can offer this to the City Council and see if they're interested in hearing it, and then it opens it up to more of the public, I would really appreciate it. I personally believe that, first of all, anyone who does this job for $1 is an incredible human being. And just a generous person, a community volunteer, that like of it is very little. So when you get someone, not only do you keep them, but you give them every tool they possibly could give, even more probably so than a regular officer, just to make sure that you keep this individual. So if they're saving our police department $333,000 a year, I think that a budget of $100,000 a year is not something that would be out of sight, out of mind. So it's something for the police department to really consider, because more and more recruitment for the police department from the community, for people who are not sure if they want to be officers, will come from this department. And as you can see, I saw some names of people. I mean, not to say anything, but I was the scout leader for Sam Mnookin and Armin Kazanjian when they were scouts. So they've done a great job, and I think that having reserves go through the reserve program initially on level 3 even, and seeing if that's what they want to do, is just an incredible thing that we can do for the community. We've been talking about community recruitments anyway, so I hope that the City Council next year will consider really giving the reserves officers separate budget and having them do recruitment and more advertising just for that department alone. So thank you very much for all the reserves officers. I think they just do an incredible job.
Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Yeah,
thank you
so
very much. Thank you.
Okay, what's next?
Agenda forecast?
Let's forecast.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, our next couple of meetings were a little bit off schedule, but we are doing a special meeting in the month of November. It'll be on November the 10th at 3:30 in the afternoon. That's to deal with some staffing issues we have that week, and the movement of the City Council meeting to what would ordinarily be our regularly scheduled commission meeting. We do have one item for that thus far, and it's a pretty significant one, having to do with class specifications for the police department. The fire department job classifications.
And that's at 3 o'clock, not at 5.
3:30, I believe.
3:30, not 5.
3:30.
Over by 6.
We'll have to be over by 6 because the Women's Commission meets afterwards.
Challenge.
We'll
Promise you, if it goes that far, it's because John has been would be talking about other things. I can't see us going for 3 hours on one item.
So far, Mr. Epkarian, you and Mr. Mnookin have been...
Ooh, don't go there.
Meeting, I
Don't go
have to
there.
agree with you.
The November 26th meeting, per our action from last meeting, was we've canceled that. That's the day before Thanksgiving. We do have one meeting planned for December the 10th, which we'll be considering amendments to our civil service rules. We'll have a...
Yeah, and just wanted to let the public know, if anyone has any suggestions or has any input on the rule amendments, that's the day that you come in. I know a number of people have made some comments in the past few years, and I've always told them, whenever there's a rule amendment, come in and give us your ideas. So if you have any ideas and if you have any consideration or changes, come and say your piece on December 10th, so we can consider them when we're going through rule amendments.
Certainly. And I want to be clear that item, it's just going to be the initial presentation of some general concepts. If we choose to proceed with some wholesale changes to the rules, we would have an obligation to meet and confer with our employee associations and other interested parties.
But that's consideration of rule amendments and any changes that we might want to consider, and then there will be some discussion with the associations to ensure that that's...
Okay. And that's all we have planned for the next few months.
Okay. All right. Any comments? Okay. What's next?
Reports and information.
We have none.
Okay. What's next?
Civil Service Commission under staff comments.
Sir, still.
Mr. Chair, I would like to recognize someone who is not here. Their absence is noted, and that would be Mr. Ron Braden, who's been our Chief Assistant City Attorney and staff member here for at least, I believe, 5 or 6 years. Mr. Braden announced his retirement and actually made his retirement effective October 17th, which was just last week. He was planning to be at the previous commission meeting to make that announcement in person. However, as you recall, that meeting got canceled at the last minute. So anyway, I did want to make that announcement and just extend a great deal of thanks to Mr. Braden for his services over the years. Mr. Braden, as you know, he's been with the city a long time. He started with us back in 1985 as an assistant city attorney. I've been promoted twice, first to senior assistant city attorney, then the chief assistant. He served as both a litigator and transactional attorney. In fact, he personally argued the famous Loader versus City of Glendale case, which went before the state Supreme Court, which established the legal basis for pre-employment drug testing, drug and alcohol screening. So that was one of the highlights of his career, one of the earliest contacts I'd ever had with Mr. Braden. He's been a very dedicated public servant to the city of Glendale, to this commission, did a lot of great work, and just want to recognize him and wish him all the best in his retirement.
I think you have another member of the staff that wants to maybe make a comment. Go ahead.
Rosie Akopian, Human Resources Analyst. I just wanted to invite you all to participate in our annual employee potluck that's coming up next Thursday. Every year we have the potluck that all the employees participate in. So.
Great, thank you so much. I wanted to, any other comment? I wanted to thank Mr. Braden for years of service to the city and to the Civil Service Commission. We've always appreciated his time. I know he's sipping on some drink at home and saying it's
not
great.
Watching us.
Not watching us for sure. So if he ever gets to work, just have a good time, and I wish you the best of luck, Mr. Braden, and thank you for your years of service to the city of Glendale. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to basically echo the comments of Matt and yourself. I have very fond memories of Ron going way, way back to when I was on the Board of Zoning Adjustments, forward to the Civil Service Commission. I especially remember Ron jumping in on a hearing that we had where the attorney for that hearing was unable to complete the findings, and without having sat through the hearing, Ron drafted up some findings that were incredibly on point. It was, I don't want to say surprising, but it was certainly, it was really showed a lot of insight to be able to pick up a transcript, read it, and get the tenor of the hearing, and he worked at that, I thought, very, very well. You were correct, Matt. His work was good. He's a longtime city employee, and he'll be missed.
Thank you very much.
Just a quick note. I had a very short period of time that I worked with him, but very, very helpful individual. Anytime you had a question, called, and he's always been very supportive. So, wish him well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sure Mr. Braden appreciates the comments. I also want to make one more comment. I know that Commissioner Coleman is at home watching this hearing. Commissioner Coleman is going to have a surgery on Friday and might miss a few meetings. We want to wish him the best of luck. We know he's going to do fine, and we want to tell you, Roy, that we know everything's going to be fine because we miss you and we need you back here soon. So get well and take those vitamins, and we'll see you back next meeting, hopefully, which will be in December.
Hear, hear.
Absolutely.
With that, we want to go ahead and go into the closed session, and we'll take the closed session items.
And we are going to be reporting out.
We will be reporting out, but it will not be televised. Thank you.